Okay, I'm gonna start recording. All right, we're gonna jump right in back to where we were the last 2 weeks. So, we started talking about everybody's dreams, and everybody started sharing those dreams. And last week, we started talking about how in church ministry you have the airplane. I'm just gonna draw this airplane again so Jamie can see my airplane. Okay, and you have two wings of the airplane. Okay, and you have doctrine on one side, and you have leadership on the other, and you need both if you're going to be effective in church ministry, because without one of those wings, you're going to crash and burn. So you can have all the doctrine right, you can have all the theology right, and you can be perfect when it comes to the spiritual side of ministry. But if you don't have leadership, then you're going to ultimately crash and burn and get held up. Or if you have a lot of leadership but you don't have the solid doctrine, what's going to happen is you're going to be able to grow and succeed, but your success isn't going to be founded upon any character, and ultimately you're going to have a failure. And so you need both to be good in ministry, and that's why we're studying leadership. We talked about last week that leadership is simply influence. Therefore, everyone is a leader to someone, and since you're a leader to someone, you have the responsibility to lead in a way that honors God. And so the question is not, are you a leader? The question is, what is the scope and what is the effectiveness of your leadership? And we start talking about that pyramid where there's 5 levels of leadership, right? And at the very bottom, you have positional. And then the next one, you have influence, where you're having a relationship with that person. The next one is productivity, where people are following you because they like what you're doing. The last one is they're following you because you're developing them. And then the pinnacle is the very best leadership. I am a leader of people who are making other leaders, right? I'm a level 5 leader who has a bunch of level 4s under me, right? And so we said to have a broad scope and highly effective leadership, that you have to have a servant's heart, be empowered by the Holy Spirit, that calls you to lead from a place of godly values. And we talked about how leaders in the church world have to lead from a place of spiritual health, and that we have to be a spiritual example and be able to say what Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ, okay? Now, Luke chapter number 19, verse number 10. I don't know where my Bible is, so I'll look it up. Luke 19, verse 10, very simple passage of scripture. It says this, Jesus speaking, he said, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost, right? And so today, what we're going to talk about, our next value is this, is that leaders lead with passionate vision, right? Leaders dream big dreams. For me, when I say vision, I mean vision, dreams, to me, it's all the same, right? And if we're going to lead this church, then we have to lead from a place of big vision and big dreams. We have to have a passionate dream inside of our heart, okay? When it comes to ministry. Now, just kind of recap a little bit. We shared some dreams a couple weeks ago. What's your number one dream that you have for your ministry right now? For your life or for your ministry? For your life or for your ministry? Or one that's at least towards the top. I know sometimes you say number one, you're like, oh, I have a hard time narrowing it down, but towards the top.
Well, that has to do with my age. I want to finish strong.
Finish strong. Come on.
Amen.
Amen.
After all this.
That's right. You want to go down fighting. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
That really is inspiring to me.
I want to follow strong.
You want to follow strong. Come on. That's good.
I love that.
That's good.
Follow him as he follows Christ.
I want my kids, I want my life and my ministry to impact my kids, probably first and foremost, in a way that reflects God, to better them, so that I can see them flourish, not from my failures, but from God's work in my life. That makes sense.
That's good.
That's probably my number one
Dream.
Yeah.
That's really good, because a lot of people lead from a place of like, this is what I did wrong. Don't do that. You know what I mean? Like, how cool it would be if your kids say, hey, this is what I saw my dad do right. That's good.
You always hear kids say that about their grandparents. Have you ever noticed that?
That's true.
But not their parents.
That's interesting. That's
Wonder
true.
why.
I've heard more faithful ministers over the last 20 years of living here who said it wasn't that they failed at their kids, raising their kids, but they've said, I wish I would have taken more time for my kids that I gave to the ministry. Like if there was one aspect that they could change, you know, and that's a hard one.
Yep.
I mean, we know it, we see it in our own lives, you know.
Where's the balance of all that? It's really hard to know. Yeah.
Are you willing to give it up for your kids because they are your priority? You know, your most significant ministry.
Yeah.
I think that's what we keep telling. We have to ask ourselves that a lot, Jamie and I.
Absolutely.
As a senior pastor, you have to make sure the kids don't see as they're playing second fiddle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's tough. My daughter felt that way. So did Michael. some,
Mhm.
but now they don't. But
Yeah.
there was times with them they did. But
Yeah.
what are you gonna do? I mean,
Mhm.
I've had to ask
somebody else
Josh.
have you. You know?
Yeah.
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 I've had to ask him, just basically, he's like sharing mommy and daddy with the whole church
Yeah.
and how that makes him feel, but, I mean,
When we were on the evangelistic field, we tried to make that a priority as far as, making sure that our kids felt like that they were on top.
yeah.
Mhm.
We had a trailer that I was telling Pastor the other day, and our kids were in church night after night after night, weeks on end at times. And,
2-week revival.
Yeah.
and so
Yeah,
that was back in the old days.
Yeah.
And 2 week revival.
Yeah.
And so we made a decision that we would allow our kids to take a night a week off and stay in the trailer because we're always parked by the church. And they had to stay in the trailer with the doors locked and they could stay there the whole service. We got tremendous criticism. We just
From some
smiled and
people.
said,
Yeah.
well, it's just whatever's important.
Yeah.
We feel like they're the most important.
Yeah.
That's good.
You got to keep the kids number one.
Yeah.
Got to keep the kids number one for sure. Dream. What's your big dream? Big dream.
I want to host a women's conference.
Yeah. That's going to come past though pretty quick. So what's it going to be after that?
My big
Bigger.
life dream is I'm going to write a book.
Write a book. I'm going to write a book too. We'll have contests. See who writes the book first.
That's,
Maybe I'll beat you.
Hey.
She's already.
Yeah.
are you really?
She's working on it.
Yeah, she's working on it.
Yeah.
I've shared mine a lot, obviously, in different contexts, because I talk a lot now. But, I really do want to see a church and body of culture. All the stuff we talked about, like that is my dream. I want to see what happens when a church does that, and then ultimately I want my ranch someday, and have the young guys out
My dream
there.
is to see 20 guys out there mentoring those boys. And
20 guys. I like that. That's a number.
That's my
That's
dream.
a
And
clear,
not
achievable
only
goal.
reaching them, but going into the school and reaching those boys there. That's my dream.
Yeah, this time. Man camp. Charity
Yeah.
man camp. Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this. So we all have these different dreams. If you could put your life, okay, in one sentence,
Oh, gosh.
because that's what Jesus just did.
Mhm.
He said, the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. What would you like one sentence be? You don't have to answer that question right now, but that's my goal, is that every person in this room could put that down in one sentence. I could tell you my life and my purpose here in one sentence, because I truly believe that is a question that helps us become a big dreamer. Because if you're going to be a big dreamer, then you got to know your purpose and why God put you here, right? Like the God wanted to see like every man saved. I mean, that's the will of God, is that all men would come to him. And so Jesus came and he knew his purpose was to seek and save the lost. And so if you're going to be a big dreamer, then you got to know your purpose. And when you think about the greatest leaders in history, normally we could describe their life in one sentence, right? Abraham Lincoln. His whole purpose was to keep the country together. It was not free slaves. He wanted to keep the country together. And he would tell you that. I mean, he could put it in one sentence.
Wow.
George Washington was to establish a free country. Winston Churchill was to maintain England's freedom, right? I quote John Wooden a lot over the last couple of weeks. It was to develop young men. And because they could put their purpose down in one sentence, right, the rest of their life flowed and their dreams came to pass. And so that has to be the forefront. That has to be the foundation in which we build the dream or the vision on. The passionate dream is knowing your purpose, right, and then seeing where you end up if you live out your purpose. That's ultimately what it means to have a dream or a vision. Saying, this is what God put me here for, and if I live for him, that's where I'm going to end up. And you need to have that. Helen Keller said this: the only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision. Right? And that's true, right? A lot of people just mosey on in life. They don't know their purpose. They don't know why God put them here. They don't have a dream for anything. And a lack of a dream or a vision in your life is going to ultimately affect everything you do, because you're going to settle for mediocrity for what God created you for, right? And Jesus knew that, right? The Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. That was his whole purpose. That's why he was here. And so because he knew his purpose, right, he did not get distracted by people who wanted to challenge him, right? Jesus didn't get sucked into the ditch of arguments. Why? Because he knew what he was here for. Jesus didn't get distracted by people who wanted to make him king. Remember, they wanted to make him king before they wanted to kill him, right? He didn't let him do that either, right? He didn't get distracted by anything that would keep him from seeking and saving the lost. And everything he did in life tied back to his purpose, to seek and save the lost. Moses had one purpose, right? That was to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt into the promised land. And everything he did tied back to his purpose and to his dream. The Apostle Paul, according to Jesus in Acts chapter number 9, was to be a light to the Gentiles. And so he says in 1 Corinthians 2:2 that he resolves to know nothing except Jesus and him crucified. I mean, these guys, they could put their life in one sentence. And because they could put their life in one sentence, they had crystal clear vision on where they were going. They had crystal clarity of what they should be doing. And they did not run 100 different directions, right? They ran one direction. Jesus' whole life from the time he was born was heading towards the cross. I mean, there's crystal clear clarity of what he was doing. And I believe that it's important for us to have that clarity, because if we don't, we're going to get sucked into doing a lot of things that God did not create us to do. And I truly believe that God does have a world-changing vision, if you will. And I know that term gets thrown around very cavalier anymore, world-changing. And when I say world changing, it could just be one person. I mean, you have that one kid that comes out of your kids ministry that their life has changed. I mean, it could be one boy on Wednesday night that you have that conversation with, and this one kid says, "Man, Lucas was the man who changed my life." I mean, that's world changing, in my opinion. It's not always about going out and having crusades. I mean, it's in the details, that I truly believe that. And in Ephesians 2, I've talked about this a lot since I've been here. Before the foundations of the world, right? God went before us and prepared the plan. So there's no doubt that God has a purpose for every single one of us, and God has a vision and a dream, if you will, for every single one of us. We just have to discover what that is, and then we have to walk in obedience to that. And if you want to be a leader of other people, then you have to point them in a direction. So you're going to have to know these two things. You're going to have to know what your purpose, and you're going to have to know what the dream is, because Proverbs 29:18 says, where there is no vision, the people cast off restraint. And there's a lot of people that try to interpret that. Let me tell you my interpretation. When there is a leadership vacuum, someone's going to try to fill it, right? When you guys were without a pastor for 6 months, how many people came to you with a great idea?
I got a special word for it. I got a special song.
Yes. Special songs, special words, great ideas. This is what we should do. Why? Because there's a vacuum. And so if you're going to be a leader, you have to have the dream, and you cannot have a vacuum, right? Because you have a vacuum, that's no good, right? Because people are going to fill it, right? And so you have to have a direction that you're going to go. And so I truly believe this as well when it comes to ministry, that God's calling for you personally is also tied to your ministry career, if you will. I think there's a unifying factor there. And that's part of what makes ministry unique, is that there's no separating your profession now, if you will, from your person. A lot of people, they can separate the two. They have their professional life and then they have their personal life. But when you're in ministry, there is no separating the two. And I truly believe that God did that on purpose, right? He's tied it all together. So if you don't have this personal purpose, then you're not going to have the dream, and you're never going to be a true leader or visionary for your ministry. And so I want to challenge you to begin the process of determining what that purpose is. I should be able to ask you in like a month and say, okay, what's your life? What's your purpose in life in one sentence? And you should be able to answer that. You need to start praying that direction. God, what is my purpose for this season? Why am I here? Now, hopefully you see the importance of understanding these two things. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of this, okay? And here's the big idea. Dreaming big dreams allows you to energize your culture, okay? The reason why this stuff is important, right, it allows you to energize your culture. I have been talking about culture a lot over the last 2 months, right? What you value, what you do equals who you are, right? However, there's no energy in that, right? That's not real exciting, right? Okay, so we have these values. We value the word of God. We value worship, right? We value the next generation. We value family, okay? We value being spirit-led. There's not a lot of energy in that, okay? There's no destination, right? So going back to the car analogy from a few weeks ago, check this out. Elspeth, you're about to see a fine looking car. Look at that.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's,
I don't know which one's the front or the back.
Stones or if it's, you know.
We'll put a headlight on there. This is the front. Okay, this is the grill.
Maybe a
Yeah.
Model A, could be old 50-something Chevy truck.
Okay, there we go. Okay. Tailpipe exhaust. All right. So if leadership is the car,
But no windows.
right? Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
windows on it. Okay. You want
Or doors.
Meet the Jetsons. It's the Jetsons. It was the Jetsons for a minute.
Nobody's driving.
Okay. Is that better?
No.
It's a suicide door. Anyways, okay, so if leadership is the car, it's the mechanical part that moves us down the road, right? So this is like all the skills of leadership. The road, right, is the culture. The dream or vision is the destination. Right? So this is the mechanics of doing it right. The culture is how we're going to get there. The dream is where we're going. You guys with me?
Yep.
Okay. Now, if I was to define dream, or if I was to define vision, I mean, it's really simple. A dream is just your envisioned future. It's in your envisioned future. Okay. So it's like, what do I see the future looking like? What am I envisioning it to be? Vision or dream ultimately is going to be your combined purpose and your values with your envisioned future. Combined purpose and values, your culture, with your envisioned future. Right? So that's why this is so important to understand, because you got to point people somewhere. Because if you just said to somebody, hey, let's get in the car and we're just going to start driving down the road, like they might think that's cool for about 5 minutes, but people want to know where they're going. Now you say, hey, let's go have a road trip, and it's really hot outside and we're going to the beach. Okay. And it's going to be fun. It's going to cost us like $50 because we're just going to sleep, anywhere we can find. Right. And we're going to, Lucas is like, let's go right now.
He's ready.
You know what I'm saying? Like now that's fun because I have a destination. Like I have somewhere to go, like, hey, let's get on an airplane. Let's just fly around for a while. Right. That's like all this. Right. Nobody wants to do that. Hey, let's get on the airplane. Let's fly to Morocco where everything's painted blue. I didn't know that till the other day.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you're like, hey, let's go. Where do you want to go?
Really is all painted blue?
I heard
There's a
that.
portion of it.
Yeah, it's all painted blue.
It's all blue.
They say it makes it cooler.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, so where do you want to go? Because you're not excited. Give me a
I
dis-
am. I'm excited.
Where do you wanna go?
I'm not sleeping on the side of the road.
It's
Stop
gotta
Okay.
have a plan.
Oh,
It's gotta be planned out.
Stop at the DoubleTree. Stop at the.
Planned out.
It has to be at the
I am
Ritz
not
Carlton.
sitting on the side of the road.
Oh, come on now. Okay, so
I need air conditioning.
It's gotta be
Now.
organized.
okay, so you still with me on this?
Yes.
Dream, the vision,
Yes.
energize us. So your job is to bring the energy to the culture and your purpose by giving it an envisioned future. So you have to ask yourself the question, when my personal purpose, right? Why has God made me as a person? Combines with my ministry and we buy into these values, what is going to happen?
Dynamite.
That's the question you have to ask yourself, okay? What is the dream? What is the outcome? And you need to be able to give voice to that and point people to it. Because I'm up here preaching culture. I want to start preaching these values. I'm going to say, hey, we need to embody these values, but they need to know what the outcome of that is, right? And everybody in your ministry needs to know the outcome of, hey, this is why God's put us here right now. This is how we're going to believe and act. This is where we're going. Because that's what gives the energy, okay? So we know our spiritual values, right? We just talked about those: Word of God, fellowship, next gen, family, right? So what happens when those values, that culture is infused into the kids ministry, into the sisterhood, into the teenagers, into the church? What is the outcome? What's the dream of that? Where are we going, right? What happens to those type of things? Because here's the reality. We need to be able to give voice to those, because you need to be able to leverage your culture. You need to be able to leverage your team. All right. Here's the thing that we have to understand about us. All right. Is that we in ourselves tend not to be nearly as good as we think we are. All right. Here's what I mean. Like most of us probably are not the greatest strategy makers. A lot of us aren't real creative on methods. Right. But the truth of the matter is you don't have to be great at those things. Okay. That's why. Are we getting attacked?
It's not really
Oh, okay. Okay.
Kids and food.
Yeah, it's
It's
our teenagers.
So back to this, okay? How do we get there, right? The strategy, the methods, how do we reach the culture? All those things are things that sometimes we can struggle with, but your job as a leader isn't to always come up with those answers,
Come on.
right? Like you don't know, like we're going back to the road analogy, you don't always have to know if you have to turn right or left. You don't always have to be able to know, do we go through Kansas or do we go through Oklahoma?
You need to know the destination.
You just need to know the destination. It's very important to understand this because what you do is when you point out the destination, right, it allows you then to leverage your team. And I read this really great analogy of it like this one time, is that leaders are not, should not be time tellers, they should be clock builders. Okay, so this is like a simple analogy. I got a clock here. Like what time is it?
6:08.
6:08. Okay. The problem is if I put this down and we wait a minute and I pull it up, it's going to be what? 6:09. And I put it down, I raise it up again 5 minutes, it's going to be 6:14. Right. And what a lot of leaders try to do is they're constantly trying to tell time. And so they're constantly running from one strategy to the next method, to the next strategy, to the next tactic to try to grow their church and get to a destination. And they're just next big event, next great idea, next
Instead
cool
of
thing.
building the clock and teaching the people how to read the clock.
Boom.
Yeah.
So a lot of pastors and ministry leaders get stuck in clock time telling versus building clocks.
Yeah.
And when you build a clock is when you build a team of people who can. Now,
Who are
You can-
thinking, we're
Yes,
strategizing, who are all heading.
Who are sold out on the vision and
Yes.
the dream where you're going.
yeah, and even sometimes they help develop that vision and dream. You
Oh,
get
yeah.
everybody together and say, hey, look, guys, we got all this stuff. Where do we want to go?
Yeah.
That's perfectly within that. But that is completely different than the way a lot of us lead because we're constantly searching for the next thing. And don't hear me misunderstand me. You're going to have the strategy and the methods. Like you can't drive in circles and end up at the dream. You got to have the strategy and methods. But
Yeah.
the point is like you don't have to come up with it on your own. You want to have your team to be a part of it because there's energy there. There's
Yes.
ownership. We don't want volunteers. We want owners,
Come on.
right? We don't want people who are here who are filling a checkbox on their to-do list. We want people here that feel like I'm a part of. I'm on the bus.
invested.
Yeah, I'm on the bus. I'm invested in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But you can only have those type of people when you have for the most part, a general idea of where you want to go. They can speak into that, but you got to know this stuff because God. Here's what I truly figured out as a staff pastor, and I don't say this to throw Pastor Michael under the bus, but there was seasons when you could just tell like he needed something fresh.
Yeah.
And I would pray, God, I need something for this time, but God ain't going to give it to me. He's only going to give it to him, and God isn't going to give the vision for the kids ministry to, Misty or Newly, just not, and God's not going to give me the vision for sisterhood, just, it's going to be you. So there's some of that you're responsible for that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you guys still with me?
Yes.
All right. Now, when you have the dream, then you can leverage your team. That's what it ultimately comes down to. So you got to have the personal purpose, the vision, dream, culture, all this stuff. We got it all wrapped up together. Now, let's move on to this next thought. The question then becomes, how do I get the dream? How do I get the purpose for my ministry? The good news is, as I said a minute ago, I have already given you the values, right? Like I've told you the values, like these 5 things are what we're going to build it on.
Yeah.
Your question is start to figure out your personal purpose. This is on you. Okay. And this is on you. All right. So a third of this work is already done. You just got to do the next 2/3. Okay. And you have to start praying. You have to start saying, God, what is it? If you're curious, I truly believe that my personal purpose in life is to preach the gospel and to help develop people. That's it. Like if I was to put it there, like everything that has been successful in my life has been tied to one of those 2 things, right? It's not going to be playing the drums. It's not going to be, setting up sound systems. It's not going to be snaking toilets. Those are all things that I've had to do. What it's ultimately going to come down to is preaching the gospel and developing people. Okay. So I told you my values. That is my purpose. Now, what's the dream? Okay. My envisioned future, right, is to develop a church where a culture impacts the community, right? Like I truly believe this to the core of who I am, that if a church would embody these values that I've been sharing with you, that's going to affect this community. And so what's the result of that? Okay. I want a men's ministry that's spirit led. And what I mean by that is that there are men who are not afraid to be strong, godly Christian men who don't feel like they have to be like feminine in that. Like a lot of things in church have like this feminine vibe, which there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not going to resonate with most guys. And if you're going to see guys out here in this community get saved, we need to have men who are confident. Like David was confident in who God created him to be. He could wield a sword and he could write a worship song at the same time. And that's what I want for our men's ministry. A successful men's ministry is a bunch of men who say, I'm going to mentor the next generation of young men, whoever that is, right? There are older men in our church that could take the Jakes and take the Austins and take the Lucases. Some of us are still young in what we're doing. And these older guys can say, hey, here's what I did right. Here's what I did wrong. They could start becoming guides to the next generation. Like there's a lot of guys who are trying to do it right. They just never had somebody teach them, right? Like I didn't have a dad that was saved. So I'm figuring a lot of this out as I go. But there's guys ahead of me that could speak into my life in that. And that's what a strong men's ministry looks like. It's having man camp where you take these kids who don't have dads.
Did you have a Lutheran dad?
Huh? No, I didn't have a Lutheran dad. Right? I didn't have a Lutheran dad, right? I want a children's ministry that does embody the word of God, because these kids are getting onslaughted with lies. And if these kids like learn that the word of God can be their source and their foundation, they can run to it for guidance and strength, and that can speak to them. Even when life is falling apart, it can be their rock. How is that going to change them when they're 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and all these lies are coming at them, and they're like, no, I'm sure of this. Like, so when the enemy starts to tell them, hey, your sexuality is in question, they're like, no, because I know what the word says about me. When they're facing all these different things, I want them to embody that, right? I want a youth ministry that embodies, worship that is void of performance, that they have fellowship with God, where they don't need validation from other people. They're legitimately in this fellowship with God, and they know who God says that they are, and they can feel him and they can walk with him. And there's no reason to put on a show, because everything about a teenager's life right now is a show. Everything has to go right. I want teenagers who say, I'm not going to fizzle out at the end, right? And I'm going to pour into the next generation of believers, whoever that is. And I'm going to be fired up and passionate about sharing what God has done, because there's nothing different that Galen and Joy have gone through than we're going through right now. It's a different time, different context, but the problems are the same, and Jesus is the same. And so there's no reason why those people can't connect to the next generation. And so if we embody those values, then what happens? Those people start living that way out there. And then that starts to become different, because those type of people, if they embody those values, they're secure in who Jesus is, and they're not thrown around by the waves of the world. And so then their coworkers start taking notice, and they're like, hey, what's different about them? So when their life's falling apart, they go to them and start talking. And what happens? Because we're spirit led, we're bold in who we are, we start telling them about Jesus. And then what happens? This church starts blowing up, right? So instead of 177, now we're running 300 or 400 people on Sunday morning. And you know what happens? Because a church decided to live such a way that impacts their community, then other people want to start finding out about it, because there's thousands and thousands of pastors in rural churches, and they come and they say, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to impact my community. They come out here and they start sitting down with Jamie and say, how do you have such a successful kids ministry? They come and sit down with the other Jamie. We have lots of Jamies. And they say, how did you have a women's ministry that makes such a difference? And then they go back and they start impacting their communities, right? And it starts to spread. Why? Because one church decided to live values, right? Those are the things I see happen. I truly think that stuff can and will happen if we know our purpose and we're heading to a dream. All right. So what's your purpose? What's your purpose? Like, I can see that. I see it happening, right? So how do you answer that question for your life? Here's some guidelines to getting your personal dream and vision, right? First, a vision and dream is always birthed in the presence of God. I mean, period. This isn't about your ideas. It's about what God's called you to do. And you can read, Moses is calling in Exodus 3. I mean, he take off your sandals, son, because this is holy ground. His dream was birthed in the presence of God, and only a true vision for your life can be birthed in the presence of God. Paul was radically saved, and he received his dream in the presence of God. And so this is why we talk so much about praying the word, right? Like, this isn't about sitting around looking on Google, finding the coolest stuff to do. Yeah. This is about God speaking to our heart and saying, this is what I have to do. And then because it's going to require sacrifice at the end of the day. It's going to require a lot of sacrifice. you know, and so you have to be just fully invested in that. Second thing about a dream is that it's always going to be based on advancing the kingdom of God. Your God-given dream has to have spiritual principle to it. And it can't be about advancing your kingdom,
Mm.
you know, and
In the kingdom of God.
that's right.
Has to be his.
It has to be his. And a lot of times we're really good at building our kingdom. And there's only two people that know if you're building God's kingdom or his kingdom. That's you and God.
Yeah.
Because we can hide that pretty quick, right? You know, third thing is that I think your personal dream is always going to flow through the dream of the church. We're not building silo ministries. We're building a church.
Amen.
And that's really important.
I think that's where I struggle sometimes. You see so many people's ambition to better the community via their own dreams and things that are outside of the church. But how do you bring them inside and say, okay, I mean, you have a group to embody around you and actually make them happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We see a lot. Well, we got this going on because we have, and it's a godly vision, but it takes so much out of people's lives to do that and this.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So you say they're pulling against each other.
Yeah, they're pulling against each other. And if they would just jump in both feet and be like, we're fully invested. Yeah, you know.
Does anybody need this? Yeah.
What was the last thing that you said?
Just a second ago.
Dreams.
Oh, the dream has to flow from the dream of the church. Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of the parameters. Now I'm going to give you, does everybody have a piece of paper?
No, my wife has mine.
Grab a piece of paper.
Here.
Share.
Oh, okay.
You need one for this.
So,
Go get a pen over
Mimi,
by his
do you
desk.
need a cappuccino or a shot of espresso?
Hey, I have those little teeny notebooks on my.
Oh, from the sisterhood thing?
Yes.
Yeah, this doesn't have to be fancy.
Yeah, I got
Okay.
it. Yeah, just please.
Okay. This is one of my favorite things. Like that, I think this really changed my life when I read it. The three circles. The three circles. Okay. I want you to take. Well, let me set this up for you. Jim Collins. If you read any leadership books, it's just going to take a matter of time before you come across this, and they're all going to take credit for what I'm about to show you. Okay. But Jim Collins was the one that came up with it.
He's the original.
He's the original,
Okay.
and it's called the hedgehog principle.
Yeah, I think I've seen this.
Okay, the hedgehog principle. The concept has been around, The hedgehog. Hedgehog. Yeah, the hedgehog. Okay. Everybody, if they knew it or not, that was a great leader, had a hedgehog principle. And when he was figuring out why these great companies were succeeding, he realized that every leader at the top had a hedgehog, and the business itself had a hedgehog. And he says, if your nonprofit or your church is going to be successful, it has a hedgehog. Okay. And here's the principle behind it. Okay. The fox and the hedgehog are arch enemies. The fox is really smart, right? He does a lot of things well. He's sly, right? He has a high level of intelligence. The hedgehog, hang on a second. Okay. The hedgehog, all right, is not very smart, and he doesn't really do anything well except for one. He's exceptionally well at rolling up inside of a ball so that the fox can't eat him. All right. And so the fox and the hedgehog play this game. The fox is trying to constantly eat the hedgehog, but the hedgehog is really good at one thing. He rolls up into a ball. So the fox will wait outside the hedgehog's hole. When the hedgehog comes out, he just rolls up into a ball. The fox can't get him. The fox will wait till he gets done going to the bathroom, rolls up into a ball, just can't eat him, right? The fox and the hedgehog. The fox is like a jack of all trades, a master of none, and the hedgehog is like an expert at one thing. And generally speaking, you need to be really good at one thing. You need to have laser focus for what you're doing, because most people who have a high level of success in life focus on one thing. Let's go back to Jesus. Came to seek and save the lost. Go back to Moses. I'm leading these people to the promised land, right? You got to have one thing that you're really good at. The question is, how do you find what that one thing is? All right. So the hedgehog, this is how you find your purpose. Draw a circle. And inside that circle, you're going to ask the question, what am I passionate about? What am I passionate about? Okay, we'll do it Canadian style. And then you start listing everything off, you know, like I'm really passionate about shooting. I'm really passionate about woodworking.
Are these circles gonna go like in a row in a special format?
They're in a special format.
Can you just tell me what that is so I know where to draw my circle?
You
Please
No.
don't make fun of me.
could
But if I
you could
draw like
a
right
circle
here,
right here.
She's technical.
Right here, this
Yeah.
is what I'm
Yeah,
passionate
you
about.
need this whole thing. They're gonna
Okay,
go
but
in circles.
She's
It doesn't-
passionate about being organized.
Yeah.
I just can't have my notes messy. I need to know what
Okay.
it's gonna look like.
Okay. So
I don't know why you guys gotta clean up.
what motivates you? The question, what motivates you? What keeps you up at night? What could you spend the rest of your life doing? Right? Like I'm passionate about preaching. I'm passionate about developing people. I'm passionate about OU football. And that has kept me up a lot. Okay, well, that list could be 100 things long. What gets you stoked up? I tell you what I'm not passionate about. That's one thing I'm not passionate about. I'm not passionate about clothes shopping.
Yeah.
All right. That's why I order the same t-shirts off Amazon. Wear the same 3 t-shirts every day. I got like 14 of them. They're all clean, I promise. But I'm not passionate about clothes shopping. All right. I'm not passionate about Avengers movies. All right. So what are you really passionate about? Now the question is, second one. Okay. What could you be the best in the world at?
Yeah. She's right. She asked for the right reasons.
Uni, you just need to know where the circles would go.
You screw up your circle. You drew a big circle, didn't you? Okay, what could you be the best in the world at? Now you start making another list, right? And hopefully there's overlap between these two. Hopefully what you could be the best in the world at, you're also passionate about. Would be the idea, And so I really think, now you don't have to be the best in the world at it now. All right, but for my sake of the analogy, I'll go with, I think with enough time, I could be like the best shooter in the world. Not the other day, but I could be. Right. And for my sake, I think I could be a pretty good preacher. I think I could really coach people. What could you be the best in the world at? Tell you what, I'm not going to be the best in the world at. I'm never going to start for OU football. We tell our kids they can do anything they want. That's just not true.
No, you can't sing, you ain't
You
singing.
ain't singing.
Don't do it.
Some people are not going to be in
the
the
next Maddie Payne.
Yeah, there's some things that I'm not going to be an NBA basketball star. It's not going
As
to
a
happen.
parent, that is tough. Like for Chris to tell him that to tell him that I believe in him and that he has the potential to be.
Yep.
Yeah. But do I have the ability to tell him the scope of why you may have that
Yeah.
bigness? Because God believes that you can carry the word of God into a realm that we don't.
Yeah.
But then, like, if I told one of my other kids that, it may not be. They may
It
be
may
the
not.
one that gets married. They may
Yep.
be the one that becomes a school. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the best I can tell him is to believe in what you, like
God
Chris
called.
he's called and passionate to do music. So you can you have to strive to be the best at it, and to be the best of the world does not happen overnight.
No.
Oh, no.
Last question. What actually makes a difference for God?
Oh man, that's like put my circle in the wrong place.
Wow.
You
What
guys
makes a
don't think
difference?
that's crazy?
What did that say?
Yeah, no.
What
because
makes
you
a
gotta
difference for the
do
kingdom?
these together.
That was like thinking that.
So, taking my example, the question is what falls in all 3 circles? What stuff falls in all 3 circles? Okay, like shooting actually doesn't make a difference for the kingdom of God. That doesn't make the cut, right? Unless, I guess maybe in some, but not my context, So for me, that's why I say I really believe that God's called me to be a preacher and develop people. That's my hedgehog.
So,
And almost everything I do is going to come back to one of those 2 things.
so the thing in the middle, the dark part, that's the hedgehog.
That's the hedgehog. What overlaps all 3? What overlaps all 3? Okay, you guys are looking at me like this makes no sense.
No, I get it. I like
Yeah.
it. I'm
It's
just
just
now I
hard for
got.
us to think about it. Like
Yeah,
what-
and now
what
we have
it
to
is.
redraw the circles and do it right.
I'm sorry.
Next
should've
time,
drawn-
If you could draw all 3 circles and not tell us what's in it.
Yeah,
would
but
help
that
our
just
notes.
kills the surprise.
We have like 4 different diagrams going.
Yeah, that kills the surprise.
I mean, for me, like flying my drones and doing what I'm doing with them.
Yeah.
They fall under best in the world and what am I, passionate about.
Yeah.
But then I try to find out how can I use it to benefit the kingdom of God.
Yeah, Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Well, and it can't. I mean, there's no doubt that Trevor out there,
Yeah.
like God has given him the eye for this.
Yeah.
And he just literally started this, 6 months ago.
And all I want to do is fly the drones, but I can't. I mean, doing the stuff with it past there, it's just not what I'm cut for. So I have to. I've asked myself a lot of these things in life.
Yeah.
Is it worth my time to?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So now we know our values. You answer that, and then you know your purpose. Now you just got to get down to the vision, future. All that stuff we laid out, telling you practically how to get there. Okay, practically how to get there. And it really just comes down to start praying, asking God, what is it that you have for us? What is it that you have for us? And that's ultimately what this comes down to. There's no grid for this. There's no shortcut for that. It only comes through prayer and seeking out the word of God, saying, God, what is it that you have for me to do? And here's the deal. When you get to that point, though, then you have something that energizes your team, because you say, this is where we're going. This is where we're going. And maybe it's an after school program for the kids. Maybe it's a women's conference where you bring in 50 women that need, just loved on for it. I mean, it could be anything. It can be anything, but it has to be God ordained. It has to be God driven. And that's how.
Can people see that?
Huh?
Can your video people see that? Can you show them real quick?
Video people.
Like he's recording it for.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
The 3 circles. Look how beautiful those circles are.
Don't do our circle.
Beautiful.
Oh, look at my several sets of circles.
And that, my friends, is how you lead and dream big dreams. Questions, comments, complaints. I'm telling you, you have this, it's going to give you clarity in everything you do.
I'm really excited about this.
That's a
I'm
question.
gonna work on this part.
The purpose is a question that I've been battling with God for years.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I struggle with it. Like
Yeah.
it's just repetitive, a lot of what we do. But,
Yeah.
But just having a knowledge of why God, I didn't know Teen Challenge from July of 2012, 2011 to 2012. 8 years later, we have Alex Brios, who is our son. I understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
You
the
see
reason.
that now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was hindsight, okay, God. And so sometimes it's just being faithful to step where he has you,
I think, too, some of this, when it comes to you can overthink it.
Yeah.
I think you got to be careful not to overthink it.
I think that is sometimes a big problem.
Yeah. and it's most of the time small things, but I do think you do have to have a clarity where you're going, because what happens so many times if you don't is you just run in 1,000 different directions at one time.
I was just about to say, we put our hands in too many things, and that
Yes.
list is way too long, and we're not becoming
Yeah.
an expert or
Effective.
excellent in the one thing that's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's really ultimately when we're talking about dream and vision, that's really what we're getting at. It's eliminating the noise and doing what God created us for, going in the direction he's called us to go. And that's how you dream the big dreams, in my opinion. Okay. So we got to be a spiritual example. Got to dream big dreams. Do you guys need a break, or are you good? Are you good?
Yeah, we good.
Need a break? You good? You good? Need some more coffee? I'm sorry. You okay? You gotta be a spiritual example.
Yeah.
All right. All right, I'm gonna keep going because I want to try to get through these. Okay, number 3. Okay, excellence. We create excellence in everything we do. Like, I am a big believer in creating excellence, doing things right. Okay, someone define for me what excellence is. Yeah, define excellence. You guys talk about it. I'm gonna get some more coffee. Anybody want
No,
some
you're
more?
gonna take a break.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Number 3 is
Find
Excellence.
excellence. And whatever you do, do it with all of your heart.
Yeah, doing it.
As unto the Lord.
Can you open that door?
Not there.
Okay, I can do that.
On a half-hour.
Is it right there?
You're good. You're good. Feel that?
Yeah, that feels good.
Depending on your talents and
And
abilities,
expertise, right.
excellence is different from one person to another.
Right.
Leadership value number 3. Shut that up.
we
No,
went
cold
before
air's
that.
coming in.
Oh.
Hot flashes,
Feels nice.
women, menopause.
Oh, okay.
No.
Well, I'm just all of the above. I'm just covering as much as possible, you know.
I think it's our good looks. It just makes us hot all the time. So we just need
Silver
that.
box, right?
You can go with that. All right, excellent.
Show up with one
Put your
here.
heart in what you do.
Putting your heart in what you do. I like that. Brother Loki said excellence is putting your heart in what you do.
What? Putting your heart in what you do?
I like
That's good, Pastor.
That's a good one. No, I didn't say that.
I
Brother
was
Loki
getting ready
did.
to say Pastor Loki, then
Yeah.
I stopped and started talking about
No, it's okay. Anybody else have something?
I think it's the same thing. Whatever you do it with all your heart, as unto the Lord, not for men.
Amen. That's what Scripture says. Proverbs 16:3. Commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be
And shall
established.
succeed.
Right? Colossians 3:17, and then verses 23 through 24 says, and whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord, not for men, knowing that is from the Lord you receive inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. Right? So obviously, as we see from these passages, that Scripture commands us, no matter what our position or status is in life, to do everything as if we're doing it unto the Lord. And when we commit our work to the Lord, then there will be success in what we are doing. And as leaders of a church, I think that's a really heavy statement, because we are doing literally the work of God, and God deserves nothing less than our best. He deserves nothing less than excellence. And when we talk about winning souls and developing disciples and advancing the kingdom, those missions have eternal consequences to them, and they deserve nothing less than excellence. So what is excellence? I love what you said, Pastor Loki, about putting your heart into it. This is what I wrote down. Excellence is the state or quality of excelling or being exceptionally good, extreme merit, or superiority. That's the actual definition for excellence. Okay, a state of quality of excelling or being exceptionally good. In short, it's putting forth the best that you possibly can, right? And in the context of church leadership, we really should put forth the best, that we possibly can. In my preparation time, I should be putting forth my best, right? When we're planning for sisterhood meetings, we should be putting forth our best. Even when we're cooking for the teenagers, we should be putting forth our best. Why? Because it's just good for us as
Wash those
people.
babies for the Lord and clean
With
it
the
up. Hallelujah.
Best that you can, all right? And the bad thing
Yeah.
is, unfortunately, that a lot of times church, when I say church, not necessarily ours, but churches are notorious for settling for mediocrity. Right, we're notorious, huh?
Or worse.
Or worse.
Leftovers is what the
Yes.
majority of people give the Lord.
They give their leftovers. Let me give you a case in point of this.
First in the kingdom.
That's right. Let
First, best.
absolutely. And get the leftovers. How many times? How has this ever happened here, where people are like, "Hey, I got something I want to donate to the youth group or to the
It's
kids"?
the old run-up.
Yeah, it's like a 40-year-old couch. Yeah.
Nobody wants to buy him a brand new one and be like,
Yeah.
Lord loves you.
Yeah.
I got that.
Junk for Jesus,
We don't want your junk for Jesus.
Yeah, but give us your nice car for the money and
Yep.
we'll give you a good tax write-off.
I can tell you the culture of church when I was evangelist. When we went there, when I was an evangelist, a long time ago, they brought food and gave you food,
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of giving you expense checks. So you
Yeah.
go eat, they brought you food.
Yeah.
So in some places, they brought their best.
Yeah.
In other places, we got tongue, heart, freezer burn, whatever.
Yeah.
Now, when they clean out the freezer. where they
Let's give it to the
throw
preacher when
away,
we do it
That's
up.
what we got.
That's
And
gross.
so it was, you could tell how the people had been trained.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I think Jesus said it best when he said, that the many came and gave in the church, the rich gave a bunch because they could, but the widow who gave 2 cents gave more than any of them
Yeah.
ever had. Because it was from her heart. It was everything she could to show the love of Jesus,
Yeah.
So, that show,
Giving leftovers.
that becomes part of culture,
Absolutely.
and that shows the community.
Absolutely.
What it says to them is, this thing's really not very important.
Mhm.
Yes. Well, and I think the other thing too is that really contributes to that is that we make a lot of excuses as to why things can't be well. Now, that's one thing that I have been very impressed with this church is that everything has been done. People seem to really care, but that's not always been my experience. A lot of places we just kind of, oh, that's good enough. You know what I mean? And I don't think that
It's just for the church.
it's just for the church. I don't think that's a good attitude to have.
Body of Christ.
My
Yeah.
favorite example of this was, I was kind of new at a place and, they had asked me to go help set up for this dinner we were having, so I did. And I said, "Where's the tablecloths?" She goes, "Oh, we thought if we put that out, made it too nice, they'd expect us to make everything nice."
Yeah. Yeah.
You just like
And I
to draw
said,
drops.
"Oh, well, we're gonna need tablecloths."
Yeah.
It's like that. If we do too much, and they expect more of us,
Yeah.
and it's an easy way out.
Or they think you're goody two shoes, or there's a wrong concept for it when your heart is really,
Right.
Jesus wants the best. I mean, he wants the best out of us. We
Yeah.
want to give him our best.
Well, it's
Yeah.
also showing love to people is how we prepare for them.
Yeah.
Yes.
How is that loving people if we're like, oh, we're just kind of glad you're here, we didn't prepare for you?
Well, I think, it was the old analogy of trying to get people to like paint the walls and put new carpet in. It's like you do that at your house.
Why would
Like
do that
you've
to
painted
church?
your house in the last 20 years, but we can't paint the church, and really ultimately, here's what I want you to see though, is that excellence has nothing to do with manpower. It has nothing to do with talent. It has nothing to do with resources. Okay. Excellence has everything to do with discipline, determination, and attitude to put forth the best possible ministry, and not settle for anything less than the best that we can do. Right. And that's ultimately what excellence is doing. And you said it very simply, putting your whole heart into something, right? You put your whole heart into something, you're going to do it with excellence to the best of your ability. And notice I keep saying the best that you can do, because we're not going to lead worship like Church on the Move, right? I mean, they have more money in their sound system than we have in our building, right? We're not going to have a choir like Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir, right? They have more people in their choir than we have in our church, right? Probably half the community showed up. We still won't be able to do it because you know what I mean? But that's not what God has called us to do. And just because you can't do it like someone else doesn't mean that you can't do something with excellence, right? And that's the point, is that excellence isn't always about quality. It's about doing the absolute best with what God has given you and striving to do better every single time. And so, I believe this with all my heart. If you are faithful with what God's given you right now, then he will increase your resources and your quality will keep going up. I think sometimes we want God to give us the best of everything up front. And that would be like giving a child, everything they ask for. Like you got to earn it so you can appreciate it. And you got to earn it because if you can manage the little things, then you get the bigger things, right? Now, I say this with all conviction, right? God has given us every resource we need right now to perform ministry at a very excellent way, right? I truly believe that. And your job and my job is to open up our eyes to those resources and to use them in an excellent way. So again, excellence is always about attitude and attention to detail. That's really what it comes down to. And I do not believe with anything inside of me that God honors half-hearted ministry, because when you read the Bible, everyone who did things for God gave 100% and gave their best. Peter said, I left everything for you. And John said, I left everything for you. I mean, they went whole hog, full bore into it. And they were committed to doing the best they could for the Lord. Remember the parable of the talents, right? God gave, or the master gave some 5, some 2, and some 1. And as they were faithful, there's something that's unique at the end of it. He says the one who has more will be given to them. Why? Because they were faithful with what God had given them, and so he could entrust them with more. And so if we're not faithful with what God has given us today and do everything with an excellent manner, then he's definitely not going to bring us more. And so the question becomes, how do I do ministry in an excellent way? And I think excellence is really found in a few principles that I want to share with you. So if you want to do excellent ministry in an excellent way, you're going to have to do it these ways. First, excellence is founded in preparation. Okay, preparation. If you're going to be excellent, then you're going to have to prepare. Excellence does not happen by accident. Excellence happens in preparation. John, I never stressed winning. I wanted the score to be a byproduct of the preparation. And John Wooden was the guy I told you guys about. He won 10 national championships in basketball in 12 years, 7 in a row. Okay. So he said, I want the score to be a byproduct of preparation. And that's really good. See, he stressed the preparation and won more than anybody else. And if we prepare properly, then we have excellence. And the reality is, just by nature, ministry is 90% preparation. I mean, if I get up and give a sermon, it took 45 minutes to give it. How many hours was there in study? You know, we plan for a service for a family day service. The whole service is going to be an hour long, and you might have 3 weeks of work into it. Start looking at what we do. Our job description really could just be preparation. I mean, you could write that down, at least from a fleshly standpoint, and be completely honest. John Wooden also said this. He said, the journey is better than the end. The preparation is the journey. The event is the end. So not only is preparation important, but we should learn to enjoy preparation because it is the journey, and the journey needs to be fun. So, the opposite is true. If procrastination is going to be the enemy of excellence because it limits you from mobilizing your resources. And I truly believe that procrastination is one of the most common and deadliest diseases of all. And it really takes its toll on anybody who wants to have success in what they do. So to properly prepare, you have to be looking into the future. That's why some of the stuff that we've been talking about are trying to get calendars far enough out and to advance schedules, getting your team trained up, lessons, all those things have to be prepared for, because you're not going to be able to adequately mobilize your resources if you're not planning far enough out. How many of you want to be called the night before an event and say, hey, this is what you need to do tomorrow? Nobody likes that. We all have plans. We all have times. So we need to be preparing so that we're not treating our volunteers that way. We know there's a big service at the end of September. We can't be calling people to volunteer the week before. We know right now in 8 weeks we're doing that service, and they need as much time as possible so that they can show up and be ready to go with excellence, right? So you have to be preparing. And the question is what should I be preparing and how far in advance? And the simple answer, in my opinion, is prepare as much as you can, as far out as you can. There's no reason why we should be waiting to the last minute to do anything, right? Because here's what preparation does. Preparation gives you margin. Margin in resources, margin in time. And the truth of the matter is, very rarely is your first idea your best idea. So let's pretend that we want to prepare a big service next Sunday. Could we pull it off? Of course we could. But it's always going to be our second best ideas, because we're going to have to go with the first thing we come up with, because we're not going to have time to think and dream and brainstorm, right? It's probably going to be some details. Margin allows you to adjust on the fly. The more time you prepare out, the more margin you have, the more you can adjust. It gives you time to work through problems. When you're sitting there and you're looking at everything, for example, Pastor Jamie and I were talking before church this morning. We said in August 25th, that's a month out, you got to have the kids here by 10:45. And when I could not sleep last night at 3 o'clock in the morning, it hit me. Well, what if somebody needs to get their kid in an emergency situation? Well, we got to have a process where if somebody says, hey, I got to leave early.
Whatever.
They got to be able to get their kid. That was something we had not talked about. But because we prepared far enough out, a month out, that gave us some margin to work through some details that didn't click with us first. Yeah, and so it gives you some margin, right? Now, the truth of the matter is preparation is a lot of work in the front end. It's a lot of work in the front end. If you're, for example, this is just my method. It's not the right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just the way God's wired me. I work very far out on my messages because somebody has to study and I have to think through it. Like I just how I am. Me and Pastor Loki were talking about that the other day. It's just how we're wired differently, and there's not a right way or a wrong way. It's just how God made my mind work. I have to think things through. And so for me to get as far out as I am today, about 7 years ago, I got up at 5 o'clock every morning for probably 2 months, and I studied messages. And I did that for 2 months so I could get, somewhere between 2 and 3 months out, and I would get up in the morning when everybody else was asleep and I would study. But the reality is now that I'm that far out, I haven't had years, because once you make that investment on the front end, you don't have to keep making that investment over and over again. And so you have to fight for it in the beginning, but in the long term, it's created some margin in my life where, chaos breaks through 1 week. I'm not scrambling on Sunday. I'm ready, right? So when you prepare, you're setting yourself up for excellence, and you're setting your team up for excellence, right? Your team is composed of people who have jobs, families, they have commitments. If you're preparing far enough out, you're building up margin in their life as well, right? And it's effective for them. And so I'll make you a guarantee. If you're not preparing, you're not going to keep people on your team, period. Right? If your teachers are figuring out the lesson plan on Saturday night because you send it to them Saturday morning, right? They're not going to stick around and teach for you for very long. Right? If our musicians are getting the music Friday, Saturday night for Sunday, they're not going to stick around for very long, right? If the ladies at the sisterhood are being told about the event, on Thursday when it's on Friday night, they're not going to stick around. They might put up with it for a while, but they're not going to do it for long term. Why? Because that's annoying. Let's just be honest. So we have to be preparing far enough out to bring excellence, and preparation does bring that excellence. John Wooden said this. I quote him a lot, but he had a lot to say about preparation. He said, if you don't have time to do it right, when are you going to have time to do it over? And it's so true.
Yeah.
That's so true. So excellence is found for preparation. Okay. Excellence, second, is founded in detail. It's the details that make things excellent. Between my junior and senior year of high school, I went to the Highway Patrol Cadet Lawman, which was pretty cool. So it's for juniors in high schools. And we went and spent 7 days with the Highway Patrol training at their academy base down at Burns Flat. And basically they condensed their, 16 weeks into 7 days. And they just gave us a little experience of what it's like to be a trooper and to go through a training. And it was a lot of fun. And the first 4 days, all we did was push-ups and get in trouble. I mean, Sunday through Wednesday, all we did was get in trouble. I remember when we finally didn't get in trouble anymore. It was Wednesday night, and we finally did something right, and we didn't get in trouble the rest of the week. But for the first 4 days, I could not walk when I got home because my feet were so sore, and I couldn't hardly raise. I'd wake up at night with cramps. They were constantly finding things for us to get in trouble about, and it was always something little. It was always a detail. The very first time we got in trouble was day number 1, and we went in. And we ate, and then there was some people went to the bathroom, and then we went outside and lined back up. And we were lining back up. Somebody came out holding a paper towel, and there was a paper towel. It wasn't even on the floor. It was halfway in the trash can and halfway out of the trash can. And so we got smoked because the paper towel did not end completely in the trash can. And so we got in trouble for that. And they started yelling at us. You got to pay attention to detail. You're going to do everything right. And they didn't tell us this at the front end. But in the long term, as they started explaining why they were beating details in our head, because he says the small things that are going to kill you.
Yeah.
Right.
The details will keep them alive.
The details will keep them alive. They said, all you got to do is forget to check the back seat of a car one time. Right. And there's a guy back there and he shoots you. Right.
Man.
All you got to do is forget to turn your lights on one time. You get smoked by a car when you're on the side of the road. He says
Wow.
the details that keep you alive. And let me tell you something. It might be all the push-ups and yelling that made me remember that, but there is so much truth in that. Like if you want to do things with excellence, then you got to pay attention to the details. How many of you have ever added a zero or accidentally subtracted a zero when you're bouncing your checkbook? Right? That happened to you, Jamie?
No, that sucks.
Yes, it does. I'll tell you what, it happened to me in charity. We were dirt poor, just started out in ministry. Knox man was born, and in the chaos of him being born, somehow we wrote down a deposit twice, and we were thousands of dollars off in the checkbook.
Oh.
Man, just a killer. It took years to recover after that because we had no money. We were dirt poor, right? So details, that was a small mistake. You're talking about a few digits in a checkbook created a couple of years of chaos,
Wow.
right? Because it started this bad cycle, right? Where we were on a credit card, and so you're paying the credit card off, and you have no money. So you got to put groceries over. It just took years to get out of that. Why? Because one mistake. So little things make big things happen, right? And so if you want to do things with excellence, then you got to be looking at the details. And this is where a lot of people go wrong in ministry because they look at the big, grand scheme idea. They're like, I see this family service with inflatables, and I see cookouts and people running around. But there's a lot of details that people often overlook. And so what happens is because they didn't think through the details, you show up that day and there's chaos. Oh, who was supposed to get the ice for the drinks? Oh, we didn't think about that. And now we're outside and it's 104 degrees and the water is 105 degrees. And so we're hot and thirsty because we didn't think through a detail. How many know we just ruined that day? What? You can't whisper over there.
DF tells us a lot about details.
Yeah.
My model is love is in the details.
Yeah.
There's not a detail that you don't experience when you're there. Yeah.
Absolutely. Let me give you another one. Let's pretend, I had a guy when I was in Royal Rangers, shout out to Royal Rangers, taught me a principle. He said, who do you think is more important in the church? He said, the pastor or the janitor? And we were all a bunch of kids. We said, the pastor, of course, he's more important. He said, okay, imagine with me, if you will. He said, not to be crude, but the pastor, he ate some bad pizza. He goes to the bathroom on Sunday morning before he goes to preach, okay? And he looks over and he sees that there's no toilet paper there. He said, now who just became more important, the janitor or the pastor?
That happened to me the other day. Kelly is very important. I
Yeah.
went to use the restroom. There was no toilet paper. That's all. I had to
Yeah.
call
Well,
Josh
she's
in to
on
bring me some
vacation,
toilet
that's right.
paper. Yes,
Yeah.
Kelly's
Yeah.
very important.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's the details that make things happen. So you have to be looking at the details. And here's the cool thing. When you give your team, this is what Hort Schulte talked about this. When you start looking through these details and you teach your team to look at the details, it gives them a sense of pride in what they're doing. Hort Schulte talked about that fact. They asked him, how can you keep people who are doing things at such a high level when you're paying them $10 an hour? And he said, because I give them a sense of pride in what they're doing. He said, I go to a restaurant and the waiter serves me on the wrong side and they don't know how to take my order and my food doesn't look good when it comes out to me. He said, most people don't care. He said, but I care because I want my people to care, because if they care, then they think they're professionals.
Yeah.
He said, when they're professionals, they give you professional service, and they give you professional service and they want to grow and they want to excel. And then the next thing I know, I don't have a busboy anymore. I have the next manager of my hotel who's making, big money. And so when you teach your team to look at the details, now they're not just showing up holding a baby, now they're showing up and there's details in there. Man, we want these babies to come out the cleanest babies these babies are going to come out of here cleaner.
Taking
Every
the
baby.
trash out.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Look at the details. Okay. Now, as a side note, the details can't be bondage. There comes a point when you think through all the details that you can, and then you just got to pull the trigger and go.
Right.
Because if not, people can get so tied up in the details that they never get anything done. And so there comes a point when you just have to say, I'm rolling with this. All right. Third thing is excellence is founded in the manageable. Okay. Here's the reality for you. You cannot do everything in excellence. You can't do everything with excellence. So you got to figure out what you can do with excellence and roll in that.
Tell Zach you can't.
Huh? I will. Here's the reality. I know that sounds counterproductive to everything I just told you, but track with me. Okay. Let's pretend I come in here and I said, hey, next Sunday, we want to mimic Michael Jackson's last concert on stage. I don't know why we would do that, but let's pretend.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, let's pretend. Let's just this, okay?
Yeah.
Let's pretend, okay? Now, I don't know. I watched Michael Jackson's documentary, and that last concert that he was going to do that he never did because he died was unreal. I've never seen anything like it. You talk about attention to details. They had thought through everything. And I don't know what kind of money they were spending on it. It was unbelievable. I mean, unbelievable how extravagant this concert was going to be. The reality is we would not be able to pull that off. We could not manage something like that with our resources. We would fail and look miserable while doing it, right? And so you can't do everything in your mind today necessarily with excellence. You have to work into things. And so you have to, and this is what I mean by, here's the key, is that you can do something with excellence.
Yeah.
You just got to figure out what that something is. But you can't do everything with excellence. You guys with me on that? There's a difference. Because going back to the Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir, I'll give you an example. When we were in Verdigris, so one of our first years there was a very exuberant lady who said, man, there's this song. We have to get a choir together. And we have to do this on Easter. This song was over the top. And I told Charity, I was like, they have 500 people in this choir as a Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir thing. We have 25.
Right.
I was like, there's no way. Oh, I can't think right now. We don't get tracked into that. But anyways, I said, there's no way.
I know. I was thinking about it. Yeah, he'll hear it.
I was like, there's no way we're going to pull that off and make it sound right. I was like, that's not something that we can do with excellence. It's just beyond us. If our church was like 40 times the size it is, we could maybe do it.
That's what those little churches did for years, was try to Brooklyn Tabernacle. They always had the books,
Yeah.
sang
The
all
robes.
songs.
I'm not saying there's not some things that you could do,
Yeah.
but this particular song we were not going to pull off. I'm just telling you. And
But I think, like I said, everything. If you're doing it with all your heart for the excellence, it's giving God your all. But we don't put ourselves out there to fail at something that we just.
Yes,
make.
never gonna
Yeah,
make it. And that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Is you have to look at what can I legitimately do, because here's what's not good. It's not good for your team to feel like they failed at something.
Right.
And so you have to look at, say, God, what have you given me? Okay, so the guy with 5 talents, right? He couldn't go invest it like he had 10. He had to invest the 5. And then we got the 5 more. Then he had 10. And then they took the 1. Now he had 11. Okay, now he can go invest it like he had 10. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Oh, guys,
Kind of like I can't lead my sound team and my worship team and preach and do check-in.
no.
I can't do all of those really, really well. I can only do one thing really, really good.
Yes. Okay. Now, now I'm not saying this to keep us from taking steps of faith or stretching. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, what has God gifted us in? And when you commit to doing everything in your ministry with excellence, then the big things are going to start coming. But you have to do those small things, the things that you can manage, right? Volunteer schedules. Are you committing things? I mean, those type of things. Then the rest of it's going to come along. So you do those things, right? You prepare, details, and manageable. You're going to achieve excellence in what you do. Okay, that's value number 3. How done are you guys? You done? You done? What time? My goal was to have everything cleaned up. Yeah. Let me see. How long is this?
Trying to get another value.
I thought about it.
I'm thinking about all the things that I'm passionate about that go in my circle.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking about.
It didn't work out so good. Then I'm going to watch that. All right. Let's call it a night. We've been going for an hour and 15 minutes. So we'll call it a night.
That was a lot
Yep.
of info.
That was a lot.
That was good.
You always get a lot.
He talks fast.
I'm passionate about memorizing scripture.